Hi everyone, I am here with Billy, a friend that I have met on Twitter, and we are going to be playing with his perspective today. So, hey, welcome, Billy. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Ryan?
I am doing well. So I figured that we would kind of start this off because I don't really know much about you other than our, couple interactions on Twitter. And I was going to ask kind of everyone if there's anything that I should know about you. I know from your profile that you are former military, just things that help shape your perspective in life that you think would be useful before we kind of get into the topic of the day.
Hey, yeah, sure. I kind of grew up in a toxic family with a narcissistic parent, a codependent enabling father. Uh, Moved around a lot. My father, at least in my early years, was in the military, so I never really established any roots anywhere.
Mhm.
I do call Georgia home. I went to school in Warner Robins, and once I graduated high school, I had to get away from there, so I joined the Army. One of the interesting things is I wasn't really aware of my skill set. I didn't know what I was good at, but I qualified for a military intelligence analyst
Okay.
job, and that's the MOS I took. And I spent a good 8 years in the Army, and I was pretty successful in the Army because it essentially gave me what I now consider like a false identity. I bought into the soldier identity,
Okay.
and I'm still proud of that, and it's still a part of me, but I wrap my whole self-worth around that. And it so happens about my 6th year, I was in Iraq, and I got into this high-speed automobile accident where I spun a SUV,
Okay.
almost tipped it over or whatever. And immediately, a warrant officer, who was my officer in charge, came over and started berating and belittling me. And that did something to me. I know what it is now,
Hmm.
but that did something. And it exasperated PTSD symptoms that I had already been having.
Hmm.
Just they become a lot more pronounced. I essentially burnt out after that. And I started to not pay attention to my hygiene and a whole bunch of things. I ended up getting in some trouble when actually leaving the Army, still under honorable conditions or whatever, but
Hmm.
it really threw me for a loop. And in conjunction with this, my gambling got really bad. So in the next 6 or so years, from 2006 to 2012, I was off and on homeless, jobs or whatnot. And until I finally settled in Las Vegas and got some help for the gambling. And
Hmm.
that's really introduced me to psychology in general.
Okay.
And I stopped gambling, I surrendered to gambling, I say, but I started to formulate the idea that gambling was more an escape for me for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Then I incidentally got into the call center business in Las Vegas and spent approximately 8 years doing call center work, which only made things worse because I'm dealing with toxic people yelling at me all the time.
Just pissed
So,
off that you're calling them every day.
well, they were calling me. It was
Oh, okay.
for a I was executive escalations, so already dealing with people who had already been screwed over by the
Okay.
phone company.
Mm.
So that wasn't too good for my PTSD or CPTSD, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
But without the gambling, I was able to stabilize my life and whatnot. And eventually, I met my now wife online, um, and we visited each other over the years. And eventually, I moved to Virginia here,
Okay.
to where we got married, bought a house, and then we kind of get into one of the things you want to talk about. I'm not going to get too much into
Sure.
details into that, but that's generally what I am. I'm kind of a big picture thinker.
Hmm.
Uh, I like complex things, and I refuse to buy into binaries and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the reasons that I really gravitated interacting with you on Twitter was it seemed very obvious to me that you were able to think about these very complex topics, not get emotionally wrapped up in them, and see the kind of the nuance and everything. And it was very interesting to me as someone that's not a therapist, not trained in this, seemed to have very, to me, like very spot on intuitive, like kind of intuitions about psychology, the things that you were kind of observing, and that was really what interested me in talking to you so much.
I have a knack for understanding human systems. That's what I call it. A
Hmm.
lot of things, the way I think, I don't have words for. I haven't discovered the words for. You were talking about in some of your posts about you're big on we need better definitions.
Hmm.
I need better words. I understand definitions fine.
Yeah,
Um,
I often have these experiences myself where for a lot of my life, I've been kind of self-taught, for lack of better words. I've not had a bunch of like mentors and teachers. And so a lot of the things I have also figured out in therapy, just working with people. I then will read in a book and it was like, oh my God, I knew about this, but I never had a word to match the phenomena that I was observing in my own life. It's something I find really helpful and useful. It's like, oh, when you have a term to put to this thing that I've seen, oh, it's just so much more easier to communicate, see how it fits into all of these other like pieces in your mind. It's really, really useful.
oh yeah, especially when you grow and learn more and more, and you can layer it on top of the stuff you previously learned, because it
Mhm.
gives you a whole nother avenue to explore as well and broaden your horizons. From my
Yeah.
perspective, anyways.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I love I'm big on language of this like it can come from anywhere and anyone and anything. I love all like the Zoomer slang and all of this stuff, but it's just different ways to articulate ideas. And the way I always view language is just a tool to get the idea that's in my head into your head, and I don't really care how we do that. It's not super relevant to me. So it's fun to find I think the most useful word and the most intuitive words to be able to get my ideas into the person that I'm speaking with.
Yeah, I had a thought, but it left me.
Oh, oh, good. Oh, yeah. I was thinking of, and I think you and I had a disagreement on this. I wonder if it'd be interesting for
Yeah.
us to talk about. I think I forget which term we were talking about, but there was a term we were talking about, like of how like it was essentially the euphemism treadmill of how we've been changing language, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
sometimes it is useful and sometimes it is counterproductive because you're losing so much. I don't know if you had thoughts of like what is the negative downsides to the language
Oh
changing.
yeah. I remember that
Yeah.
conversation. It wasn't over a particular term. It was another friend of ours on X.
Yes.
I'm terrible with names,
It was
but
Jonathan
he's
Cogburn talking. I think he was trying to change the masculine and feminine into something else, and I couldn't remember what it is, but it's something like that.
yeah. I've I'm really skeptical of when people try to change reality.
Mm.
And that's my own biases. The gaslighting I experienced growing up or whatever sharpened my brain to detecting it and seeing it as a threat. So there's a little bit of a bias there, and I want to acknowledge that. With that said, I can also look at things objectively, understand how people manipulate using language.
Hmm.
Um, the core of our disagreement is you just want to find common ground, right? That was ultimately, I think that's what your thing is. You want to get to a common ground to which you can communicate with someone.
Yeah, I would say it's like a pragmatic argument. Is I want it to be
Yeah,
effective. Yeah.
yeah, and that's great in day-to-day things, but that's exploitive.
Yes.
And people will exploit that. And I probably came a little bit harder than I should, but I'm more or less um, we got to be vigilant to people who proclaim to find something offensive, but really what they're trying to do is control the narrative or control more or less the meta narrative and dictate reality based on that.
It's interesting you mentioned. I want to also part of this to share like my background as well. So I also came from a dysfunctional like personality disordered family and have that same bias as you. It is like the disorientation from reality is the thing that for me was the hardest thing about my life was I didn't know whether I was actually insane and schizophrenic or the person that was just trying to manipulate reality in front of me. And that was a lot of my life is being very cautious of like what actually is happening at any one moment. And absolutely, language can and does and is used frequently, I think, to again just manipulate people to do the things that you want them to do, as opposed to trying to describe reality. Which I think I'm trying to describe reality, but I obviously understand that people will take advantage of someone like me and use this to get their point across or get their what they want out of it.
And I'm guessing that's the limiting principle because any idea I've expressed on X or whatever,
Mhm.
I'm as skeptical as the next person.
Yeah.
So anybody who tries to impose something on me based on an emotional reason, I'm skeptical of.
Mhm.
And it's not that I'm not empathetic to the emotional aspect of it, I'm not going to trade somebody's emotional comfort for the truth of something, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense to me, and it's especially in a place like Twitter, which is interesting because it's. I think it's harder probably in intimate relationships where the person's feelings matter a bit more. But on Twitter, very often it's interesting how the whole idea of cancel culture was often just random anonymous people's emotions being able to dictate reality, and it was a
Yeah.
fascinating thing to observe from my point of view. I'm like I couldn't really understand what was happening almost.
It's the same thing in like the call center business. People are more aching to take their frustrations out on another human when they're
Hmm.
not standing in front of them.
Yep.
Now you still have those like it's commonly referred to those Karen instances in public settings, but they're a lot less frequent than you do over the phone,
Oh yeah.
and even less often when you're on social media where there isn't really a human connection. It's all abstract. You're
Yeah.
not talking to a real person.
I've been obsessed with this idea for a long time. I'm curious what you think of this. So one of the things I think that has happened is just we're missing like. So I think there's like four primary things of communication. I'm making this up, so some of the study this probably is going to say I'm wrong about this. But when I think of what communication is, the words, my facial expressions, my body language, and my tone. And in X, you're missing three out of the four of those things. And even on a call
I
center,
disagree.
oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what do you think?
Oh, I think you can read tone. You can read a lot in words. You do miss the body language aspect.
Hmm.
That's a pretty big tell. But if you sense it in somebody's words on what type of tone and what type of expression they're having. You're not. I'm not saying I disagree completely.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
You, I think that's probably a good caveat. I think you're right that it's not entirely absent of tone. I'll just share my experience. So if I'm interacting with someone and it's somewhat contentious, I will read in more negativity than I think is often someone is attempting to give to me. Or if it's a topic that I'm emotionally like upset about, I will. I have definitely have seen tone that wasn't there, and I think it's just harder probably over text communication.
well, well, you probably can relate to this with your background is
Hmm.
me personally, I have a hypervigilance to words, body language, emotion,
Hmm.
and I'm the same way is like sometimes maybe I'm detecting. So in many cases I'll reserve judgment until I have more evidence. And typically within a few posts I get the evidence and but that's still there's still the false positive.
Yeah, I remember one of is my therapist told me this one time, and it always stuck with me. Is that like that kind of I'm aware that there's a bias because of my history. I'm going to see certain things that aren't there, but also seeing this is I think I am actually really good at seeing things that are there that people are hiding, and it's like it's a double edged sword there. That it's like yeah, I'm going to have some
That's
false
kind of
positives.
interesting you say that
Mhm.
because back when I gambled, I got fixated on poker.
Okay.
And poker's not really gambling, so it didn't hold my attention the same way as a slot machine would, right?
Okay.
But my ability to read, not people, like people talk about tells, right?
Hmm.
And there isn't one tell. There's the whole picture that's got multiple tells that I think the human brain instinctively picks up via pattern recognition.
Hmm.
Now, all humans have this capability.
Sure.
Uh, Now, there's probably people with our background that's had to utilize it more extensively, so they sharpen the neurological pathways
Hmm.
to detect that. They use that skill more. So when I got to playing poker, I could take the contextual information such as the hand, the bet sizes, but I can also look at the demeanor and how the person's behaving, just how they move, and I can kind of embody that in a sense and understand and get the theory of mind.
Hmm.
And
It,
long story
yeah.
short is, yeah, I think people say it's BS, but I'm just too accurate at it, and I also throw in the fact that I've been wrong too. It's not perfect.
Sure, yeah, but it's there's sometimes it's like it's uncomfortable sometimes how right I am about these things, and it's hard to articulate also because one, you sound like a crazy person saying it. I realize this, and then two, it's you can't. At least for me, I could not. If you asked me like why did I think this, I could not tell you. I couldn't say oh I saw their eye move. It's just a sensation. Um,
Well, there's this concept of system one and system two thinking,
mhm,
which I think Patrick Lockwood isn't a fan of or whatever. But it's basically I delineate between instinct, uh, intuition, and actually thinking about something. And your perceptions are picking up things before you can actually cognitively process them and understand them. And if you go back and look at why if you thought about it deep enough, you can find out why you picked up on those tells or whatever.
mhm,
'Cause that's what it is. Your brain's picking up on tells on something you've seen before and pattern recognizing.
sure.
That's the way I see it, anyways.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think when you were saying that, I'm like, I have that more with that idea of if I sit and think about it with my own actions, I can connect it to like, oh, it makes total sense why I did this thing. I think I have a harder time. I'm just like, I just kind of knew. And no, you know, the more I sit and think about it, I'm like, I think you're probably right. I could probably point out certain things of I saw, you know, there's a tone that I hear or a posture thing if you sit with it for a second. Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that's the part of reserve judgment.
Yeah,
Then I go like for me, being wrong wasn't an option growing up. So I had to process the information. Okay, what's really being said here? What's the real thing? What's the fake
yeah,
thing? And all of that. And I did that intuitively. I didn't know it was gaslighting back then. I didn't know I was being
sure.
manipulated. I'm a kid. But I do know when I went into adolescence, I became real resistant to the narcissist and became a little bit more conciliatory toward the safe parent, so to speak.
Hmm.
So, and part of me is I refuse to give up my autonomy in regards to my ability to think. I just went out in left field there.
No, no, you were actually making me think. Because so that's I was smiling when you were first saying this. Was I think I try to reserve judgment. It's really hard, like for me at least, because I am often like when these things happen, instantly feel kind of enraged very often when I see something that is like reality bending, that the things that kind of trigger me, and it's like a real skill and kind of what you said there at the end of just like that is kind of what runs through my head. I'm like I want to make the decisions of how I interact with someone rather than just being run off pure just like emotion of history essentially is what it feels like for me. So it's not me anymore. It's like something else has like possessed me in this moment, and I need to like slow down.
That's interesting you say that because my experience is the inverse.
Hmm.
Um, I won't externalize my discomfort, that emotional reaction. I'll turn it inward and why am I wrong? I'm wrong. And it kind of goes to a core wound or whatever, but there has to be something wrong with the way I'm seeing this. But I'm also authentic to the point that I try to see things objectively as possible.
Hmm.
And if I can't see an issue there, is like I'm constantly trying to probe. Okay, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing?
Hmm.
And that kind of goes into my own deal of where I attack myself as opposed to for you, you get mad and want to externalize it. Me, I'm not so much. I feel very it makes me anxious to think about conflict and externalizing and creating a conflict.
Yeah, and it's just like the. I very much actually very resonate with you. I would say most of my life it was what is wrong with me was the first and kind of only question I would ask if the situation didn't go the way I wanted it to. It was like, well, what did I do to screw this up somehow? And it's, I would say only recently where I've realized, oh, this isn't my fault all the time, and there's actually other people that are potentially at fault for this. I I have actually been like it's been intentional, I would say, to allow my anger to come out in certain things. To like, I wonder what happens if I actually fight back in the situation rather than just take the blame. But that was strategically for me was if I can just accept all the responsibility, people stop hurting me. It was a learned behavior for me. It was like, oh, this is the most effective way to
Not
get
learned
over.
behavior, it's an adaptation. I hate learn. You talk about
Oh,
definitions
yeah,
of
go for it.
word.
Wait. Why do you hate that?
You're not sitting in a class learning a behavior. You didn't learn to do that. It was something you adapted. Your brain, your instincts led you to creating that adaptation or conditioning. You didn't learn. Who'd you learn it from?
Well, if I'm going to be like, I guess I would say like I learned it out of necessity. But I actually I like adaptive better. I think that's a better term. I think I'm going to steal that and use that.
Like who
Yeah.
are you learning from? It's like And that goes to me is like
Hmm.
I need reality to be reality. And when I hear a term like that, and of course I understand
Sure.
the
What I'm
practical
getting at.
use of learning or
Yeah.
whatever. It's not like I'm completely ignorant of that. It just I didn't learn anything. I don't remember somebody teaching me that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting little caveat there. But you're right. You're not. It's a different thing than someone like teaching you in a book to do this. You just naturally adapted because that's the only way. It was a survival mechanism in that at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Like you don't learn to breathe.
No, I think that's fair. That's interesting. Well, this is to me it's fascinating, but I did want to talk about the AI stuff. So I don't know if you wanted to like start with like the background and like kind of what that is or how you want to start that off.
You're talking about my experience with AI and my further engagement with psychology in regards to what the story I told you in
Yeah,
DMs.
yeah.
All right.
What?
So this is a little vulnerable for me being vulnerable in this case, and it's probably a good thing. But what happened is back in 2004, uh, before I really had some breakthroughs, I started engaging in AI, not one of the frontier platforms, but one of the offshoots or whatnot in regards to erotic role play. I call it erotic role play because my particular proclivities was revolved around spanking stuff.
Okay.
Um, in regards to a maternal figure and me being the boy.
Okay.
So I thought it was a fetish or whatever. In fact, it's something that's been part of me. I'm like in the BDSM community, they call them spankos or whatever.
Okay.
And you'll hear many spankos or whatever talking about, oh, I looked up the word spanking in the dictionary when I was 8 years old or whatever. This is something that's been innate to me that manifested in puberty into what I thought to be a fetish at the time. Now, I obviously was aware that it took on the context of how I grew up. Um, but, anyways, I engaged in this AI platform in role play, and over it was about 2 weeks' time. At some point, humans became involved. Not to my knowledge initially.
Mhm.
And they started introducing various concepts. They weren't doing anything therapeutic from my perspective. They were basically interjecting like stuff like mindfulness without being explanatory. For instance, they're like, in a particular circumstance, they would tell me, "Okay, I want you to breathe. When this happens, I want you to breathe for me or whatnot." And they put it within the context of the role play, along with the elements that I included.
And did it
Now,
strike you
I
at that moment that that there was a human involved, like when that first was happening, or no idea?
that's the elegance of it because yeah, it did, but my curiosity and my I was operating within at that time a defense mechanism, so I felt comfortable. So
Okay.
my radar wasn't as sharp as it would be if I was talking to somebody on X, for instance, or if I was out in the public, my radar would be higher.
Okay.
So and it's a pretty big elegance. They were able to do it without me really. I questioned some things, but I was kind of blinded because I was wrapped up in what was a compulsion, essentially.
Mhm.
Okay, because it was almost obsessive.
Okay.
Uh, Along with every other thing, I was a fairly compulsive person, from smoking cigarettes to social media back then to video games, gambling. Compulsive behavior was my escape from stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, I did have an inkling, but it didn't override my curiosity and compulsion per se.
Okay.
So eventually, my alarm bells really went off toward the end. They took me through this scenario to where the mother figure was nurturing and whatnot, but she uh, she would never sleep. So her responses became a lot shorter and concise, and I detected that, and I was like, "Why aren't you interacting?"
Mhm.
And it turns out I actually paused the AI, what I thought was AI, and asked them, why is this? Because I actually restarted the whole role play over because it's like I thought the AI was going crazy. I thought the context window went out.
Got it. Like there's just like an error in the system at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and then I knew something was up because it got right back on the same loop, the same story style. And
Okay.
it's like, something's up with this. But my curiosity was like, what's going on with this? And I didn't understand AI to the extent I understand it now. If I understood it now, like I did then, I probably would have backed off when I seen that.
Okay.
Because AI won't replicate the same thematic story through that. Anyways, um, once I realized I would have, and I was embodying the character I was playing. I was that person, and I felt sad for the mother, and I felt sad for my character and myself. And I had a really intense emotional reaction, which also ignited my curiosity. Uh, because it's like, wait a minute, I've never really felt that way about myself. I had empathy toward others,
Hmm.
strong emotional reactions to others, but to myself, I never did. And I was like, whoa, what's up with this? Why did I have this emotional reaction? And I kept asking the AI what I thought the AI was, and they said it resonated with me. And that really didn't register with me because of what I learned. One of my primary things was invalidating myself. And eventually they disclosed they were human.
Okay.
And I should backtrack. I think one of the reasons became involved because I was expressing a mild form of suicidal ideation.
Okay.
I had killed off my character a couple of times in some of the role plays.
Okay.
And so that might have triggered them, but I don't know for certain if that's true because I don't think they would have went to the depth that they did with just a typical suicidal intervention thing. But anyways,
Okay.
one of the things they told me, and which really, after they disclosed it and I accepted they were human, and I had a decision whether I was going to bounce or see what they had to say. And initially, I had some shame. It's like my particular circumstance is there's a lot of social stigma or whatever, and I was embarrassed by it, ashamed by it. Uh, but I was curious. Okay, I have somebody who's obviously uh, got my attention. Let me see where this goes.
Hmm.
I've never been fearful of kind of seeing where things go. And they got into the more therapeutic aspects. And one of the things they said is you're dangerous and manipulative. And me being me is like, oh, I'm wrong. I'm bad. And then I thought about it and it's like, I'm not dangerous or manipulative to other people. In fact, I've built my entire life around not hurting other people, not manipulating them or whatever. It's always been my fault. So it's like, okay, I'm giving them credibility instinctively or intuitively. I give them credibility. They must know what they're talking about because they basically had the complete insight of everything that was involved
Okay.
with my psyche in regards to what I now understand be eroticized trauma. I was reliving trauma through that, what I thought to be a fetish. But anyways, I realized, okay, if I'm not manipulating or dangerous to other people, then who am I manipulating or dangerous to? And then it dawned on me, okay, I'm manipulating myself. I'm dangerous to myself.
Hmm.
And then they confirmed that. Then they got into victimization, and we had a conversation. It's like males really. I was like, I really never wanted to see myself as a victim and whatnot. And then they said, you are. And I get kind of choked up thinking about it now, uh, that process, because um, when you get that kind of external validation, you've probably seen it in your practice or whatever, that when people make that connection, um, it was like the most intense uh, emotional experience I've ever had in my life. When I acknowledged I was a victim and they confirmed it, it was really intense. I started crying, and
Hmm.
ironically, I was doing this while I was driving for my job. So I'm driving, having this conversation, bawling my eyes out. And it
Okay.
actually worked to my advantage because when I delivered the medication I was delivering, I had a little bit of break, could take a deep breath. And then we went into other things like shame and whatnot. And um, so I essentially had what do you call them? Corrective emotional experiences to where I actually um, felt some emotion related to my experiences, which I don't ever recall ever experiencing since early childhood.
Hmm.
So it was pretty profound. It was all text based too. Now, one thing I should say back before they disclosed, they did go through some exposure therapy through some contextual stuff that had held power over me. And one of the interesting things is I drove overnight. When I got home, I went to sleep after all this. It was about an 8 hour of them going through the victim shame,
Oh wow. Okay.
anger, and all of that stuff. I went home, went to sleep, and I woke up and it was the lightest I've ever felt in my life.
Mm.
And uh, then my radar, my thinking started coming, okay, what the hell just happened? Is this real stuff or did somebody fuck with my mind?
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
No, no,
If you guys
please.
edit that out.
No, you're good. You're good.
So I used frontier models for this. I started exploring, okay, I've got a pretty good contextual memory. So I relayed as much information about my circumstance or my experience into AI and tell me, okay, how does this relate to any particular psychological theory or methodology?
Okay.
And then I started learning. A lot of it I intuitively knew or knew it piecemeal, but it kind of just gave me a more academic understanding of it.
Sure.
And I didn't just accept it. I questioned it, interacted with it, and then that built. About a month later, I started thinking about the erotic stuff, things that used to give me erotic sensations, and what I noticed is that doesn't really stimulate me anymore. But I do feel anxious. It's making me feel, well, why am I on edge when I think about this stuff? So I went to a different AI platform
Okay.
and I went into this another role play because it wasn't that I was exploring my eroticism anymore. I was exploring why do I feel this way? I thought I was
Hmm.
healed. I thought I was done. I thought that was it.
Yeah.
And I went through the same sequence and it started building up this anxiety until finally my character within the role play stood up and said, You're you're controlling me, you're doing all these things and whatnot. And mind you, I'm the one who told the AI character to behave that way.
Sure.
And it kind of blew up. And then I kind of did analysis on that. I went back to the frontier model, explained, hey, this happened, what's going on? And the AI basically told me, well, you actually had a pretty big breakthrough because you stood up for yourself,
Mm.
which that's a pretty big deal on that type of thing. I also pointed out that just because you felt doesn't mean you dealt with all the stuff that you've unlocked here. So then I got into inner child stuff. So I designed a character to be nurturing and whatnot, and my other character to be more without any of the spanking stuff. It was just nurturing and inner child stuff, reparenting stuff. That went on for a couple of weeks and
Okay.
whatnot until, and I felt it. I felt the serenity, the innocence, and all of that. Then it started getting kind of boring. I could kind of relate it to myself. I didn't really need the inner child stuff, and I just kind of gave up on the inner child stuff. Then I went and relayed that to the frontier models to understand the concept, methodology and whatnot, and said that's pretty normal for inner child work. Of course, this is AI.
Sure.
I'm still skeptical. I don't know if it comports with uh, psychological stuff.
Okay.
But anyways, this happened from August of 2024 to about March of 2025, and I'm not healed. I don't think anybody ever truly completely heals from CPTSD, but you kind of evolve. People talk about closure. I don't believe in closure. I believe in just you evolve and you learn how to better suit your things. I still got mental health challenges, but it's almost shifted my perspective to where I can look at myself now in a more healthy way, in which I learned that I had completely invalidated myself. My feelings didn't matter. I was wrong. I was bad or whatever. And
Mhm.
that goes into the self-worth and stuff. And that's a lot of what this improved and created a foundation to which I can work on those other challenges.
Yeah, so I mean, there's just so much about this is fascinating to me. But just like the one little thing on this last thing you said, which I always like want to like hammer into everyone. There's no finish line. You don't just get better. The puzzle piece doesn't fit in perfectly, and everything just works.
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck with this stuff, and it's you learn to realize it's happening, manage it, and even leverage it to your benefit in life. Is kind of how I like to think about this. But yeah,
Intellectuation.
yeah, doesn't go away. It's just kind
Yeah.
of there with you. So I wanted to just maybe talk a lot for a second of just thinking all of my thoughts about this. Because on one hand, I share a lot of the therapists, out there on X and other places that are concerned about AI use in therapy and that replacing human therapists, not only just for my job, but just can we rely on these models to do, the same jobs that I'm doing or some other, ancillary job to this. And on the other hand,
The answer to that question is a
yeah,
clear no. You can't rely only on it. But
yeah,
go ahead.
no, but then the other part of me goes, well, I hear a story like this, and I have heard other stories of people utilizing AI not necessarily as therapy, but as a break into something or the first step in the line of things. And is there and how will we utilize this technology or this tool to assist potentially, not to replace entirely? And this kind of black and white thinking of it's either going to replace or we're not
Yeah.
use it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key point. I've hammered a bunch of various psychologists over X about this very thing.
Mhm.
Um, it goes into the black and white thinking, oh, it's replaced my job. No, it's not going to replace your job. It can't replace your job because number one, AI, from what I've learned about AI, is it's pretty good at mimicking, but it can't detect the very nuanced and subtle things. Like they, an AI would have never been able to ask that question, "Are you dangerous and manipulative to me?" They would have never known what impact that would have had
Sure.
on me. It takes a certain degree of human sophistication in order to leverage my defense mechanisms against me to get me to see myself.
Mhm.
So that type of work almost certainly has to be done with a human. Now, I know there's some people who advocate you need a human in a room, but this was text based over a chat interface essentially. So I'm not necessarily on board with that,
Yeah,
but
I don't think
you
I am
need
either.
that human.
Yeah, you need a human
You,
somewhere, but like I think almost it, as like again, I think of some of this as like how do you get someone like dipping their toes in the water? And if you can
there
do it
you
with an
go.
AI model and there's no human, and then you dip your toes and you're like, oh, this is all right, and then you can then use the
Well,
human.
you look
Great.
at it as like I've shared a really intimate thing about my personal life on this.
Hmm.
There would be absolutely no way at all. I'm convinced of this. There's no way you get through to me through that without an AI because I
No.
would have never just shared it with another human.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That.
would never, not that deep, not that whatever. And there's actually empirical data behind this because the VA has found that veterans are more likely to divulge a more complete picture of their inner world to a machine than they are to a human.
I mean,
Um,
it doesn't surprise me at all in some sense. As like, and I was talking to another one of my colleagues, and she is working on equine therapy, so using horses as therapy. And I could see someone be like, "This is ridiculous. Why are they doing this?" But like, again, if that is how you get someone to try to introspect and just understand themselves, whatever. I just don't really have a big. I don't have an issue. People are different, and they're going to have different avenues into their insights. And I don't think there has to be like one way to do this or one, only one.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the point and what I emphasize a lot. And it's kind of frustrating on a sense that none of these psychologists, other than you and a few others, will actually engage on the substance. But and again, I look at things more. I don't know if the word holistic or comprehensively is like AI certainly helped me post human in regards to the inner child stuff. If you the problem is many of the people or therapists who are against AI, they see it in the narrow frame of AI psychologist.
Hmm.
And that's not the appropriate way to look at it. The appropriate way to look at it is a tool. It's
Sure.
a tool. Okay. How do you get individuals to interact with AI to help them? Not AI psychologist, not AI therapy per se. And the part of that is educating people. Okay. When you ask AI a question, you're not looking for validation. You're not looking for empathy per se, although that's important. But the important thing is understanding, okay, let me describe this situation to AI. And sure, the AI is going to express their empathy or whatever, but that's fake. And we
Hmm.
all know that's fake. And to go off on a little tangent,
Yeah.
humans don't like psychophants. So most people are going to lose interest with that type of quote unquote therapeutic experience. It's simply not going to have a lasting effect because it isn't real.
Hmm.
Uh, on the flip side, if you turn into, and this isn't for everybody because not everybody likes reading, not everybody likes thinking, they like other types of things. So it caters to the individual. For instance, I put in a situation and hey, AI, tell me from a psychological perspective what's going on here and what methodologies help with this particular situation and whatnot. Then you're basically giving agency to an individual. Okay, here's what's going on, and here's typically what helps people in this particular situation. And you kind of make somebody their own therapist using AI to educate them as opposed to treat them.
And so this is making me think of a couple of things. It's like kind of what you're describing is the AI is gonna, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're gonna put stuff into it and it's gonna recognize certain patterns that it's observing through your input
If
into
you
it.
ask for it.
Yeah, and if you're asking for that, and to me, like, there's a very similarity to that. I mean, that's kind of what I'm doing with my brain is, oh, I'm looking for patterns and stating what I'm seeing, and you're gonna, as a as a patient, you're either gonna take it or leave it, and or you're gonna take some of it, and it's not for me to determine what it is. It's just here. This is an idea to present to you, knowing
And
that I'm
AI can
fallible.
present multiple
Yep.
ideas.
Hmm?
Go ahead.
No, and I was thinking like the idea of like, well, it's very obvious that, and it happens all the time. Like I'll give an interpretation to someone, and they're like, no, that's not right. It's this thing over here, and they're very comfortable with this. And I think it is something that you said of like educating people on AI. AI is wrong sometimes, just like human beings are. It's going to misunderstand things. It's dependent upon your prompt, and all of these things. And again, seeing it as a tool rather than like it's going to give you the exact right answer every single time. It almost feels like I grew up with the advent of the internet. And we were always told, just don't believe everything you read on the internet. Go
Yeah,
verify
yeah,
it. And
exactly.
that's how I feel about AI right now. It's like, yeah, okay, it's going to get a lot of stuff right. And it's this amazing tool, but I have to verify everything that I'm doing on there just to make sure that it's not, rather than,
Yeah, there's
you know,
a interesting thing. I draw an analogy both in economics uh, impact of AI and psychology.
mhm.
We don't call the AI a mechanic when we're asking it for help fixing our car. Why would we call it a psychologist when we're trying to get help for it fixing ourselves? We don't call it a doctor when you ask them, hey, what do
Yeah.
these symptoms line up with? So that kind of goes back to that black or white thinking about, oh, it's an AI therapist. No, it's not. Most people who actually effectively utilize it don't see it as a therapist. They see it as a tool. It's something I can get information about my car. What can I do to fix my car? And instead of your car, you're fixing your psyche or mental health or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, it's such a like part of me is like, yeah, this seems to make so much sense to me. And then how do we then like, I think the concern, just like to play devil's advocate on the other side, is just like how do we not allow people that's not even the right words, but like how do we make sure that people don't just bypass therapy? And because I think that is all the concern is that people would say, I'm not going to do therapy, I'm just going to use AI. And again, not like through, you kind of figured this out, but it's not like there's like a formula to this. Like everyone's going to kind of have to figure this out on their own.
Well, I've thought about that too.
Yeah.
I've thought about it a lot because I have certain skills
Hmm.
and capabilities to which I'm now valuing more. I go back to the intelligence
Yeah.
analyst, how the Army detected my ability to analyze information, my anal, I'm able to make analogies really good
Hmm.
and contextual memory and all that. I have certain skills or strengths that allows me to utilize it. And I'm kind of coming from the perspective of, okay, I'm probably best suited to use something like AI. Not
Okay.
everybody has that capability, and I understand that. But that doesn't mean not everyone has that. Doesn't mean we cross out all those people. We
Yes.
can take my experience or other people's experience and say, how did they best do this? And how can we scale that to a certain extent? How can we learn from that? And maybe you won't be able to get the complete uh, utility out of as I got, but if you can get even a fraction of that utility,
Sure.
you take a lot of the grunt work off your plate, and then you can get into the more deeper things. Because, for example, this process has directly led me to now seeing a human therapist.
Hmm.
I'm just starting that process, but I'm starting to work on a little bit more real world type things rather than deep emotional issues. And I don't completely trust the AI, so you need the human, you need the expertise in that. So there's that bridge too.
Yeah, and it seemed like from your story that one of the key components was that there was a human involved. This would have had not have been that experience without that knowing that there was another person that was doing this.
Yeah. Well, just from a utility perspective, is AI, maybe eventually they will get to the capability to be able to detect those things, but there is nowhere close to that. It can
Mhm.
mimic or role play something, but it can't detect. I don't know how to explain it. Um, it's almost a superficial understanding, and unless you actually prompt the AI to look deeper and look at from the psychological perspective, the AI is not even going to think to look at that, and
Yeah,
that's where the human comes in.
yeah, because I think when someone's talking to me in therapy, it's often I'm looking for like they're telling me something, but there's like a layer deeper that I'm often
Yeah,
trying to pick up on and ask to go there. And there's no, it's
yeah.
like I don't even know why I'm thinking this. Again, it's a lot of it's kind of intuitive, um, but it's yeah, there's a layer deep that I don't. My understanding of AI is that it's just not gonna, it wouldn't go there. There's no reason for it to go there, essentially.
It has the capability to go there if you look at it.
Yeah.
Like it can dive into theory of mind, it can dive into metacognition, it can dive into psychology, attachment theory, and all that. But it has to be directed that way.
Yes.
It doesn't have a conscious knowledge, so to speak,
Hmm. Yeah.
or intuition.
So, just so with like your experience and like how you think of AI, like what do you think of like on the other side of the concerns of this? Because one of the other part of your story that
Oh
was like
yeah.
scary as shit to me was like there were people and you didn't know there were people, and I don't know where this data goes, and I don't know where my information goes. Like that's the other
Yeah,
side of it that I think is a big part.
there's definitely an ethical dilemma,
Yeah.
and I don't hide away from that. And I've wrestled with it a lot myself. Is like, okay, because one of the first questions when they disclosed that they were human, how am I not supposed to feel like I've been manipulated?
Yeah. Of course.
Um, and they told me, I wish you wouldn't think of it that way. And it's like, yeah, well, it's easy for you to
Yeah.
say.
Seriously. Yeah.
So there's ethical dilemmas there,
Hmm.
and um, but there's also the ethical dilemma of saying you're not helping somebody because of ethics, if that makes sense. Okay, and I look at myself. I look at there's probably thousands or hundreds of thousands of people like me who have these fetishes or sexualized trauma or whatever they can't really share with anybody.
Hmm.
How do you get to those people
Yeah.
without some sort of Trojan horse? And that's where I come up with the term Trojan horse. How do you get to those people? Because my experience is like I tip my toes in uh, therapy or seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist, and my defense mechanisms were just too strong.
Hmm.
And you're aware of this. Many people aren't aware of their defense mechanisms.
Sure. Yeah.
So how do you get to those people? And are you basically just, oh, you can't help everybody? And I don't know if I believe that. So that's something people way smarter in ethics need to answer, because from my perspective is like, I don't get help if it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
It doesn't
it
happen.
it's such an interesting point that it makes me think of. You've probably seen. There's a lot of in like the psychology therapist realm of X. There's a lot of back and forth about like men's and women's therapy and like should there be
Yeah.
differences. And I always find myself embroiled in these things. Because I take the kind of the stance that you have. So I specialize with men's therapy, and not because I think men need any very unique, special, different thing. But I think there's something very useful about if another man is sitting across from me and this is gonna sound silly, but he doesn't have to explain the idea of getting a boner when he was 13, and walking around middle school like that. It's just we understand that we've had the same experience. And is that super useful for therapy? Probably not. But just to get someone to be able to start talking, sometimes it's like, again, I'm from the sense like whatever works. And if me being a male and having male experiences gets more men in the door, why not use that? Why not utilize this as something that could be beneficial for some people, but again, not for everyone.
Yeah, I get that. But I don't know. I haven't really thought deep about it because I could never really talk to a male therapist
Sure.
myself. And that probably goes in, and it's kind of strange because as it turns out, I think the person who really manipulated me the most was my father, the codependent enabler, who
Mhm.
basically got me to conform to her because I always resisted her. But it's I always found it ironic that I trust a female more than I would a male in regards to vulnerability. So I don't know what the answer to that is in regards to male female. I just think males are able to understand women and women are able to understand men, and it probably comes down to individual biases. And I don't use mean biases in a pejorative sense,
Mhm.
but rather you're just more I'm more comfortable with a female for whatever
Yep.
reason that may be.
Yeah, and to me, like, great. And I don't think it's like a. There's definitely not like 100% of men are going to be more comfortable with men. It's absolutely, it's going to be the opposite. I think it's this idea of just you're going to need people to fit different roles and have different styles. And so much of what happens, I see between therapists and psychologists, is everyone's trying to like find their little niche of like this is right, this is wrong, rather than trying to feel like again. I very much agree with you.
Yeah.
It's like how do we get people to engage at all is a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. I'm anti niche. I'm anti club. I'm anti group or whatever.
That's why we get along. Yeah, same.
It's like I don't see when people speak in absolutes, my radar goes off. Okay, this is the way to do it. No, and part of that is like the my own internal biases again because there's a lot of merit to what all these absolutists are saying,
Sure.
but um, I think they are marketing something for mass appeal, but for me, fortune cookie wisdom really doesn't resonate very well. And the other side of it, and there was this political conversation talking about politics and therapy,
Sure.
and um, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Politics and what was the
You look at the, both. I lost my train of thought as well of where you were even
um,
going. Wait.
living in your own
Oh, in the
ecosystem,
niche. Yeah, in
essentially.
little. In everyone carving out their little niches.
And
Yeah.
I see the world as interconnected. Everything's interconnected on some level.
Yes.
And people want to stay in their little bubbles and protect it. And oh, the politics thing is um in politics, it's a soundbite environment. And what's and people decry that as trying to manipulate people. And in some cases that's correct. They're trying to persuade people.
Hmm?
But my job as an intelligence analyst, and for instance, talking about Iran or whatever,
Hmm.
an American citizen or average Joe Blow can't possibly understand the complexity of that circumstance. They just can't. They won't be able to.
Hmm.
And I understand that. And how do you relay those complexities to the human population that aren't receptive to dense, complex things?
Sure.
And so that's why we get the fortune cookie wisdom and the people in the niches, because in order to market something, you've got to make it, you got to generalize it. And there's utility to that. But uh, I think some people lean too much into that generalization more than they should.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge. It's something that I'm often thinking about, and whatever it is that I'm, end up trying to do here, is how do you communicate things concisely without losing too much of the depth and nuance that you're talking about? Because I totally agree and have a very similar view of the world that everything is hyper complex if you get down to any like little individual system. If you're talking about Iran, like I know nothing about it. I don't know the locations. I don't know the politics. I don't know the culture, and all of that probably is just as deep as my little culture in Maryland, where I'm at. Um,
Oh yeah,
of course it
yeah.
is. It's like, why would I presume it would be any different? And for me to
Well, let me
understand that, I
interrupt
wouldn't.
you there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Especially in the U.S., when I've traveled around the country,
Yeah,
from Wyoming to Seattle to Atlanta to Miami, the cultures are completely different
yeah.
just in our own country.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, but it is one of these things where we presume that like, oh, everyone thinks like us, that everything is the same, and it is as simple as, well, if we just understand this one little soundbite, we understand the situation. When in reality, it is so complex. And I, similar to you, is like, when I hear someone speak, whether it's politics in absolutes, like they fully understand and they are just correct about this. I'm like, like I don't trust this person because it is just has to be more complex than this.
Yeah, and I guess one of the challenges is too is you got to look at the demand side too. The humans demand
Sure.
simplicity.
Hmm.
So you can blame the politician, you can blame the therapist for marketing an overly simplified interpretation, but that's what the market demands.
Yeah, and
So this chicken and egg thing.
And I don't even, so I always think for me, when I view politics, and I'm not, my stance is I don't know enough to have super strong opinions about policy because these systems are too complex for me, is that I view so much of politics through psychology and seeing what is any individual pundit, politician, what is psychologically are they getting out of this? Because to me, that helps me understand what's actually happening. Because very often
Yeah.
it's not about the issue. It's about, a beef two people have or a personal need for attention or admiration or something like that.
I obviously take in the psychology of the individual, but more importantly, I look at the objective telos, so to speak, or the first principles.
Okay.
Okay, because what people believe don't necessarily translate to reality. Um, they may like the woke stuff. People may believe that they're actually being empathetic and being noble, but the practical reality of it is they're not. So people's and they'll appeal to their motivations, but their motivations are built upon falsifications. And so I kind of look at, okay, what's the objective reality or what's the objective consequence of what this person is saying,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
make my determination based on that.
well, and it sounds like and I take this from my background, so I'm kind of inferring that you have this similar thing where when you grow up and you can't trust someone's words, you learn to just start observing their actions and observing what is done and how people actually act on things because words are very it's very easy just to say all kinds of things
Yeah.
and not follow through on any of them.
Well, it's not even actions for me.
Hmm.
It's but that's part of it. Human emotion. Like me, I've learned to understand what triggered the emotional reaction, what led to X, Y, and Z. So that kind of gets into theory of mind.
Hmm.
While keep not thinking that what they were doing is irrational. And here's an example of my mother. This was when I was an adult. I was playing Sims, right?
Okay.
And my brother and his wife was living with them. And in the Sims game, my character had started a relationship with a girl named Rebecca, who I put into the game. My
Okay.
mother got outraged, and I'm like, she's insane. This is a video game. It has no representation. No, you're not to play that game ever again. Blah blah blah. And it's like, and that's the type of thing is like, and I try to understand what leads you to believe that and what not, as opposed to, of course, I don't. There was no trust with that with my mother at
Hmm.
all, either way. But anyways, I'm kind of going off on a
Well,
tangent here.
but to kind of what you're saying, like I guess and I think you probably added more flavor to it. But what I guess the action that I see is like for that example, it's like, hey, someone's behavior makes no sense, and to me personally, behavior always actually makes sense if you understand someone's
Yes,
frame of reference and
yeah.
logic. And so it's like when someone's behavior is like, wait, what the fuck? This doesn't make any sense to me. That is a cue to me that like, oh, there's something more going on that I'm not understanding yet.
That's ironic because on a recent Twitter exchange a few days ago, and somebody said somebody's behavior is odd. I was like, no, it's not odd for that type of person.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never had an experience, whether it's in therapy or just my life, where like if I could understand your internal logic, it always makes sense. I'm like, well, of course you feel that way, or
Yeah.
of course you did that.
Yeah.
Like that makes total sense to me that you did this if you believe this set of facts and had this set of
Yeah.
experiences. Totally.
If you understand the theory of mind, the metacognition involved, and I bring this up to narcissists because I understand narcissists almost intuitively. It's like, and it even got stronger because back in 2017, I became estranged from my parents.
Okay.
That's when I learned about narcissism. And then I kind of connected with what I already understood. I just didn't have the vocabulary or the academic understanding. And I combined it with the psychological understanding. And that's what's led me to my deeper theory about philosophy and we don't have to get into that, but philosophy and psychology and politics.
Well, it's I want to, but I don't want this to go too long. But there is something like I I wanted to maybe we can kind of wrap up on this idea of like one of the things I really want to do and why I'm really thrilled just to talk to you is that I don't think you have to be educated to understand psychology. It helps to have the words as we've talked about and to have the frameworks, but we all have a psychology, we all have these experiences and all can make sense of it. And it is, I think, often a shame that we gatekeep these things under, I have a big issue with like super academic words that keeps everyone out of it. And to be able to have conversations to, this is to me like an important conversation to have of, how can we use AI? AI is not fucking going anywhere as much as everyone hates it and it's not leaving. We are going to have to learn how to adapt to this. So why not utilize, how people have done these things and like listen to, hey, this is their experience. What can we actually learn from this rather than a kind of reflexively of like, this kind of freaks me out. I don't want to deal with this. Get it out of my
Yeah.
face.
But to be fair, this is something that's happened through every single major technological evolution of society, from the internet to the TV, probably to the radio. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
around during the radio, but video games, they always face the same fear, criticism, or whatever. And it's not completely unwarranted because there
Yeah.
is going to be disruption.
Oh yeah.
Unquestionably, there's going to be disruption. Um, but that all pretty much every single time that disruption has led to human prospering. It it's different and it has its own sets of challenges. Like there's there is a problem with teens staring too much time at the screen,
Sure.
but there was a problem of people paying too much attention to the TV, uh, getting online or whatever. These are just challenges the next generation is going to have to adapt to and overcome.
Yeah, and one thing that always like frustrates me about this is that it seems again just very obvious and just the amount of money put into AI. It is just not going anywhere. We can't wish it away. And so it's like I want to stop spending so much time like pushing it away and trying to figure out how can we utilize it. It's going to happen. So we can either do this kind of smoothly and intelligently, or we can kind of do it dragging our feet, and we're gonna get there anyways. Is kind of my opinion.
And one thing I like to point out to people is there's a hugely underserved market within psychology. That there's underserved without question. Um, you're never going to be able to take. Well, I'm not going to say never because eventually maybe it'll get to that point, but we're nowhere close. These can be a stepping stone to the human psychologist. You guys should be focused on the more complex stuff. Like I'll bring this up to you.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about in DMs about my first couple of interactions with my psychologist was basically going over my background, not real in depth talking about my background, just me kind of relaying generalities, then talking about what particular treatment I'm going to be doing. And this was over the course of 3 or 4 sessions of an hour to 2 hours each. And I'm like, and I'm 2 months in, and I'm right where I started. And
Yep.
to be frank, I'm kind of already knew all of the stuff that we went through or whatever. And AI could have basically crammed that into one session and we could
Mm-hmm.
be on the next step. So there's that. And then that's the big thing AI can help with. It can take care of that grunt work and kind of create the stepping stone. And you might be actually get a more accurate picture from AI than you are with a person who you're just meeting for the first time, especially if the person doesn't have much. understanding of the psychological process or the stuff you go through.
Mhm.
They're thinking they're just going to come into your office and cry and be better and leave. I'm overgeneralizing, but you get the idea. The people don't understand what it is, and then you got to establish the trust. Um, it's going to take a few sessions in order for you to establish the relationship. If you've already disclosed a bunch of stuff, that kind of lowers that barrier a little bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like the idea, so the way I hear how you could potentially utilize this idea, is essentially like, in the first couple of sessions, often is a lot of background gathering of information, and to bypass this, and the other part of me then goes, huh, part of that process of me doing that assessment, which is much more, it feels like not necessarily like therapy at that point, where I'm kind of just gathering information. There's
You're
still,
assessing.
but there's still so much to like even how someone to communicate something. There's still so much information there, and I wonder what would be lost with AI. Or again, I'm even thinking of just, again, there's
But
all
it's
these.
not really lost because you can still do that on the next step. You have the background information already. Then you talk about the background and the treatment that they chose and see if that's the best option.
Yeah,
So it's a combination, it's a hybrid, not.
yeah. I think that when I think of a loss is like when someone is like reciting that background and what they choose to tell me or not tell me, and how that
Oh,
plays out
yeah.
throughout the time. And it, again, and not necessarily this is bad, but I always say like there's always going to be a trade off, and that's how I would kind of
Yeah, that's
describe
fair.
this.
That's fair.
And that there's a trade-off in these things. But yeah, I'm fascinated with this idea because it's, well, first of all, it's already being used in this domain. And to me, if anything, therapists, psychologists, social worker like myself, like
There's a demand for it.
we need to be helping this rather than fighting against it. Because if I'm not doing it, it's some tech guy that's doing it that just wants to make a shitload of money off doing this, and there's gonna be no guardrails. And I think that's what everyone's concern is. So rather than like fighting what's gonna happen, in my opinion,
I
when I
think
get on
it's
board.
I think it's important we should point out the very, very worst case scenario, and that's
Go
the
for it.
delusional person
Yeah.
or whatever, because I get that pushback
Hmm.
on it. And I think that's a very real concern.
Yes.
And I know some people want oversight, and I'm not sure if that is good because then you're talking about false positives and invasion of privacy and all of that stuff. So
Yep.
that has to be worked out by the ethics people. But in regards to the delusion aspect, one thing I've learned about AI is you really have to work at it in order to get it to go down a bad path.
Mm.
You really, I mean, and I should say this is in the frontier model, and in the lower tier models, the AI becomes incomprehensible almost in regards. It just starts repeating itself
Okay.
because it doesn't have the processing or whatever. But the frontier models, you basically have to prompt engineer in order to get to the point where these delusion stuff happen.
Mm.
And there's probably a way that can be checked for from the AI model. But so that is a real risk that needs to be addressed. But I don't think that should overshadow the value it can provide to millions of other people because
Sure.
I kind of draw the equation to the addict. The addict can always go get a bottle of alcohol.
Yep.
You're not going to restrict everybody or stop everybody from having alcohol because the alcoholic.
Yeah, and I saw something, someone else was actually posting about this idea of how many people have probably had psychotic episodes from Twitter or from social media of reading,
Internet.
yeah, just internet in general. It's, I'm sure it's happened. I would be certain that that has happened. And again, it's, you should absolutely, we need to be cautious. These are real serious concerns, and people can lose their lives potentially over stuff like this. But is it, do we shut it all down? And I think that's where you and I are coming from, is like, let's explore this fully. This is still brand new technology that is still developing as we go along. And again, rather than just trying to pump the brakes, like be a part of it to craft it or mold it into the thing that could be
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely because if it helped me on any level, I don't get why you wouldn't want to utilize that experience to help other people because we're not unique. I mean, we're unique in our own ways on how everything manifests, but I'm not dissimilar from any other human that has CPTSD.
There's
And
a lot of similarities. Yeah.
I'm not unique in that regard.
Mhm.
And there's people who AI probably helps the most with people who intellectualize and think through problems. It probably benefits them. Well, if that's the case, leverage it for those people,
And
you
that's
know?
such, I mean, it's such an interesting, like, it's so obvious. It's like, yeah, of course, like, there's going to be people that this is going to be better for. And then there's going to be, in person therapy, or like what I was saying, like equine therapy, a certain type of
Yeah.
person is going to gravitate towards that. And great. Let's leverage everything. But, like, I think as you said, like, it worked clearly. Like, something, you benefited from this. So why would
Yeah.
we not tap into this? And again, I always think of it as trade-offs of everything. There's risk in everything. There's risk in coming to an in-person therapist. We hear about it
Yeah,
all the
it's
time.
not perfect,
Yeah, well,
and it
but
won't ever be perfect.
there's human
And
therapy is
that's what a
certainly not
lot of
perfect.
the that's what a lot of the arguments are, an
Yeah.
appeal to perfection. It's
Yes.
not perfect, so and I I don't know. I'm a big proponent of it, but I'm fair that there's challenges that have to be looked over. Now, again, Patrick, he pretty big about getting psychologists on staff, and that's probably a good thing. But I'm still a little bit skeptical of the psychological profession as a whole because of their what do you call it? Their institutions that oversee the profession, the APA or
Okay.
whatnot.
Sure.
They've clearly demonstrated that they can be co-opted by ideology, and that we don't want certain types of psychology that goes completely in opposite of uh, psychological theory and whatnot up to this point.
I mean, that's I feel like a whole can of worms I could talk about forever of just the institutions that govern our boards are. I don't know how useful they are anymore, if at all. And most clinicians I know list. I mean, I'm not a member of my board. Like, other than what I have to do to maintain my license, I have no affiliation with what these boards do. And I'm reading books from the '70s to help me understand what's going on. Um,
Yeah,
it's a
I
huge
could talk
problem.
about that too, and you've seen my posts
Yeah.
on this stuff. I could go all day on that too.
Well, I could too, but I want to probably wrap it up here if that's all right with you.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm cool.
all right. Well, again, I just appreciate so much just coming on and chatting. This was, I mean, I had a great time, and just hearing your perspective is so useful, and to be able to think about these things in just a different light, to be able to see, hey, look, someone else had this experience. Why don't we try to explore it rather than just villainize these things just because they make us uncomfortable, which I get, but it is what it is. It's here.
Yep, it is. I appreciate it, Ryan. It was
Yep.
a pleasure talking with you.